All right, well, I'm here with Andy Trainor, former CLO at Walmart. Really excited to have you join me here live and in person at DevLearn. This has been a great week, being able to do these podcasts face-to-face rather than through the internet, so I'm really glad you took some time to join me.
Appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, and I think what's great is that one of the things you're doing here, you've given a session talking a bit about VR, which I find fascinating in the L&D space. I think VR has been around in my mind since the 80s. We've been trying to figure out how to leverage it. It always comes around as, this new technology. Well, it's not necessarily. But I think we finally landed in this place where the technology is advanced enough and some of the costs have come down and connectivity and things like that have sort of lined up where, hey, there's stuff we can really do with it. So I was hoping you could share with us, maybe some of the things you talked about in your session, or even just some of the experience you've had leveraging VR, because I know that was the big thing, is you've done that for Walmart.
Yeah, so again, appreciate the time and having the opportunity to talk. Yeah, so yesterday what I talked about was it was more understanding how to actually execute virtual reality into a large company. And so that's what I talked to the group about. Just to give you some background, so I was at Walmart 23 years. Last role was Chief Learning Officer for the Walmart U.S. business. Back in, 2016, we started to roll out virtual reality to all 5,000 stores. So we bought 18,000 Oculus Go's, which was all of them. Literally everyone that at the time Facebook had built, we bought and rolled them out across the 5,000 stores. And we're training 1.5 million people a year on VR. Back in 16 to 18 is when we rolled it out. So it was really talking about how to do that and how we did it and what we did. And it's funny you say that it feels like it's been around forever. We used to train, not we, but the United States trained our pilots on how to fly in World War II using an older version of virtual reality. So it's been around forever, but you're right, as technology has advanced and the headsets have shrunk, and now that you don't have tethered headsets, it's a lot more affordable and easier to scale. So that's really what we talked about yesterday.
Oh, that's cool. I mean, on the one hand, affordable. On the other hand, few organizations outside of Walmart could purchase that many headsets and ship them around to the stores. Yeah, I think I've talked to some other organizations that have taken approach like that, but they buy a much smaller set of equipment and then send it place to place as they need it. But were you sending them literally like to every location almost? Or?
Well, yeah. So the way we did it was we have something called the Walmart Academies, which there's 200 locations in active stores spread across the United States that we built to train our frontline associates how to do their job. And so we use those as a hub. So every academy has anywhere from 15 to 30 stores they support. So we had our facilitators in these academies. We shipped to the 200 locations, and then they took those headsets and took them to each individual store that they supported to do the training. So, it took us probably 18 months to scale it out from nothing to 18,000. So still pretty fast, but a lot of work. Team did a great job.
A lot of logistics.
Yeah.
So I think the key question then becomes, what was the VR experience that you were delivering?
Yeah, so back then it was the Oculus Go, which was 3 degrees of freedom, so a lot different than today. But what we used to prove it out was something called the wet wall. So in grocery stores, there's a wall that's got all the leafy green vegetables.
Oh, okay, yeah.
And so it's super complicated. There's humidity levels, moisture content, temperature, and so it's the highest throwaway area in a store. And so every store, every grocer is always trying to figure out a way how to reduce the throws. Very high turnover for people because it's so complicated. So we built a module that you would walk down a wet wall aisle and you had to identify what was wrong. Which items which ones weren't getting the right moisture, or the temperatures, stacking height. Normally it was taking us 3 to 4 weeks to train somebody. We built a module that in 3 to 4 minutes you could walk down, see every problem. You had to identify it. We kind of gamified it where it was timed. Once it was done, you had to go back and it showed you what you picked, and you had to explain why you got it right or why you got it wrong. And it took our training from 3 to 4 weeks to 3 to 4 minutes, because you can recreate every problem you're going to see that takes a month to see in 4 minutes. And so, and anybody that's ever used VR before, you know that your brain thinks it's real. So it becomes this experience in your brain. Experiences become memories. Memory becomes habit. Habit becomes instinct. So you instinctively know what to do when you see something that you trained on in VR. And so it reduced our throws by probably 15%.
Wow.
And it reduced our turnover by probably over 50%. So we knew pretty early that this was a modality that could not only improve productivity, reduce turnover, but associates loved it. It was just cool. And so then we expanded it to all kind of different things.
That's there's something we've seen. We've done some research in like frontline industries, retail, restaurants, and just about the learner experience and what companies are doing, what learners like, don't like, that kind of thing. And one of the things that came back from both groups, both employees and employers, as far as challenges to training on the front line, there's not enough time or not an opportunity to practice stuff. Right? I can tell you anything I can show you a video, I can give you a game, I can whatever it is, but then can you actually do it? And it's a very tricky thing in these environments to say, okay, now go do it for real with actual customers or actual product, where you might have some real implications of a mistake. And so the idea that, we don't have to, I don't know if I'm being too flip about like wasting the product in that training environment. I've seen, again, working a lot with the restaurant industry, I've seen them with VR will create sort of the ingredient area, and in VR you would put the ingredients together to make things instead of wasting real product to practice on how to make.
That's
something.
right, and that's a great point, because it took us almost a year to figure out what to use it for and what not to use it for, because it's very important to pick the right things. And when you first start it, everybody wants to use it for everything.
Yeah.
And you only should use it where you can't recreate the situation. It's either not safe or not feasible, or it's not something that happens often enough that you can recreate it.
Yeah.
And so we learned over time what to use it for. And again, it's if you want to practice, VR is unbelievably perfect for being able to recreate a situation that you don't want to recreate in real life.
Yeah.
And you can do it over and over.
Yeah, so you mentioned it. I think is the acronym, is it DICE? Is it dangerous, impossible, counterproductive, and expensive?
Expensive, yeah, I think so.
The sort of the rules of thumb for
That's right.
VR, because I think you're right. The thing about VR, it's such a kind of a gimmicky technology when you first come around to it. And so companies see it and they're like, okay, I don't want it because it's a gimmick. Or I'm going to overuse it because it's gimmicky. And like, I have this VR. We can send you to Mars. I'm like, okay, but what does that have to do with my job? Do I do my job on Mars? So you're, I think, spot on of it's a very specific thing that it isn't done just because, hey, look what we can do. It's solving a real problem where, I've seen it where there's a dangerous, hazardous environment which you can't constantly put people in, or you literally can't recreate it because it's dangerous.
Yeah, I think the one situation that was probably the most beneficial to us from a scaling it perspective and got leadership crazily bought into it was active shooter. So unfortunately, in the retail environment, there's always going to be somebody who wants to go into a location and hurt people. It's just, you would think we'd get better at it, but we're not. And we had training that was the typical e-learning that was compliant, and we checked all the boxes. We taught people what they were supposed to do, but we knew it wasn't effective. And so we decided to build a module that was an active shooter situation. So we closed the store overnight. We recreated an active shooter situation, filmed it in 360 video, and this again was probably in 2018. So it was in 3 degrees of freedom, and there was no blood, there was no guts, but you saw the shooter, saw the gun, heard the shots, and you had to react appropriately and make decisions throughout the whole scenario. A couple things came from that. One, it was extremely intense, and people were getting triggered from past experiences.
It goes back to what you said about the brain.
That's right.
Tells you it's real.
It's real. And so this was a big pivotal moment for us on how we trained people, that we had this discussion about, okay, you're triggering people. And my answer was, yeah, we are. And that's the intent. Right. Would you rather someone find out in a safe environment that this is not something they want to deal with or can't deal with and can take the headset off and talk about it? Or would you rather wait until they're in a store and there's somebody with a gun pointing at them and it's the life or death? And so that was this big moment for us to decide, if there's situations that could trigger somebody, we want them to experience it in a safe environment first so we can talk about it and decide, is this the job for you? Is this the environment for you? Or how do we address it versus waiting until the end? So we started doing that every quarter, training this active shooter. About 1.5 million people a quarter were going through it. And unfortunately, probably about 2 to 3 years later, we had a situation in El Paso, Texas, where 23 people in our store were killed. But there was over 2,000 people in the store at the time. And so when we went back to try to understand what happened and why, the 23 ran into the front of the store into a bank. There was no exit out of the bank. So the shooter went in there and they couldn't get out. But the rest of the 2,000, by the time the shooter got out, which was minutes, he didn't kill himself. The police didn't get there for 5 minutes or so. He didn't run out of bullets. He wandered the store and there was nobody in it. And then the police got there and got him. And so when we asked the associates, how did you get 2,000 people out of the store in a matter of minutes? Every single associate said, because I did the VR training, I instinctively knew what to do. I didn't have to think about what you taught me. I didn't have to think about a PowerPoint or
What
speech.
page was that on?
I just instinctively knew to get them all out. And so that was when it took off. Like, if you can remember a traumatic experience, what to do that you think's never going to happen to you. No one ever thinks it's going to happen. And just instinctively do it. This is unbelievable modality. So that's when we really scaled it out across the whole, a whole lot of different areas.
Yeah, and and it's a shame because I mean, clearly the purpose exists. It was there behind the training in the first place, and it's tragic that you have that the demonstration of its value is in that. It's like this is what we were after all along. And to shift gears a little bit, I mean, I think that shows you now sort of the breadth, right? Where at one point VR was literally, well, I can't send somebody into a burning building, so we'll recreate it, or something like you're describing. But then I'm starting to see even much more mundane yet practical applications where you need to have difficult conversation with somebody. Very hard to do in real time. You can't learn that skill on the job. Or even I've seen stuff around like equity and inclusion where you can put somebody in somebody else's shoes and see what that's like. And I think it's amazing because everyone they hear VR, they think so far out there, but there's actual real practical things that you can do. What are some of the other things that either you've seen done or that you maybe see happening in the future?
Yeah, and we used it for all of that.
Okay.
I think ideally what we did and what you have to get an ROI to justify the cost of it, right? Headsets are getting cheaper, content's expensive, and so that's the big cost that a lot of people don't understand as you go into it. So you have to find something that's we tried to do hard skills to pay for it, soft skills to utilize it, because soft skills are really hard to get an ROI on to nail down exactly what the benefit was. And so we started doing difficult conversations. So during COVID, all of a sudden wearing a mask or not wearing a mask was something to fight over. And how do you deal with that? And so we used it a lot for, okay, here is a 6'8" man with a 80-year-old 4'3" woman saying he's not going to wear a mask. What does she do? And how does she react? And you can put him in VR and create that situation. Customer service, checkout lines, where people get frustrated. And how do you react that way? DE&I is a phenomenal way to your point, put somebody in somebody else's shoes. I think what's really cool with the creation of AI, it starts to open up the use of VR can be even more and better. So what I mean by that is that before AI, when you build a module, you kind of branch it off. If it's almost like choose your own adventure. If you say yes, this happens. If you say no, this happens, and you have to pre-build all that.
Right.
So if you take it 2 or 3 times, you already know what's going to happen.
Everything already exists
That's right.
in that universe.
With AI now, we can actually randomize or completely personalize the interaction based on what you say and how you say it. So we've created, with the company I was at before SkillsVR, we created a module that was difficult conversations, and based on your tone, the words you use, your body language, we would change the reaction of the customer that you're talking to. So if you elevate your voice, they get angry. If you're calm, they get calm. If you move forward, they get aggressive. And so now every time you take it, it's very different feedback and very different reactions that allow you to learn. And so now this cost of this module that was maybe you could take twice and then you know what's happening, you can use it for a long period of time, and you can go in and change the AI model based on the responses you want to happen and use it for a lot longer. So the technology, not only is the hardware getting cheaper, but the software is allowing the content to be more utilized for a lot longer than it was before. So the affordability of it is getting better all the time.
Do you see a future where AI and VR continue to meld, where you're getting more generative things happening in the VR, whereas not only is it adjusting based on what you're saying, but actually creating the reality as you go, right? Depending on what you do.
Yes.
Do you see the future in that?
Yeah, it's interesting. So we were working on with a customer in the finance industry. One of the challenges they were having was, how do you have a conversation with an investor, a couple that's 55 that was going to retire next year? The market just dropped, and now they can't retire for another 5 years. How do you call them and have that conversation? Or the reverse. And so they were having a hard time because it's finance people. They're not typically the most people friendly.
They're driven by different.
That's right.
motivators.
They like numbers, not people. And so they were creating their own AI model internal that would look at the industry news and feed in, and every day, or I think first they wanted every day. We got them to every month. It would pull all that data in and change what their calls would be based on the economic conditions of that month. And so, yeah, we hadn't finished it yet, obviously, but that I do see you can change the inputs with this AI model and refresh it as often as you want to be specific to whatever's going on in the moment versus what you think might happen.
Yeah.
Which is really cool.
Yeah, I think that's, we talk a lot about AI in a lot of different areas, and there's lots of different levels of understanding and what's going to happen. But I think one of the areas where there's a real promise, as opposed to some of the, crazy things you hear, some of the real promise is the way AI can make a lot of our systems or processes more dynamic, because it's just too much for a person or people to go in and re-engineer, rethink, take things out, add new things, edit existing things, all that. Whereas the AI can do that, obviously, almost instantaneously. And so almost anything you can create, if you have a flow of input, you can make whatever it is dynamic based on what's happening. I think that's going to be so critical for businesses, because what do we talk about all the time? Business happens so fast, and you have to keep up with the speed of business. And let's face it, at some point, human beings can't keep up that pace with the scale of things that they're trying to manage.
Yeah, you're exactly right. And what a lot of companies don't understand is, as you start to grow your VR program, and I had this problem at Walmart. We probably had, 100 modules in VR. And in the first 4 to 5 years, most of my budget was going to creating new ones. All of a sudden, at year 3 to 4, most of my budget was going to maintaining existing modules and updating them versus creating new ones. And the longer I did it, and the larger my library got, the less I could create new things.
Bigger that anchor gets.
That's right. And I was just spending my whole budget to exist, not to grow. With AI now, it helps create content a lot faster and a lot easier. And so now you could pay an expert to build your module, and then use these SDK tools or these AI models to help maintain it and update things based on if you change your sign color or the wording you want to use or whatever it may be. And so now the maintenance cost, because of this AI technology, has significantly dropped and sped the process up, so you can spend more on creating, which, by the way, is cheaper because of these AI models as well. So I really think that's going to be the flip for VR is, as content becomes easier, quicker, and more affordable, then there's no reason not to use it. Today, e-learning is so cheap to build. It's not great, but it's cheap. Whereas once VR gets to that point and it's close, then it should be the rocket ship for it.
No, yeah, I love to hear about some of the real stuff, or like the real potential in AI, rather than all of the the hype that seems to be thrown around. So before I let you go, one of the things I wanted to ask, and I don't know, because I wasn't able to attend your session, but I would like to know: did anybody ask you like an interesting question while you were there? I like to hear what people are thinking, because I do sessions too, and you think you're sort of on target with what you're talking about, but then someone asks you a question, and you're like, it gives you a real sense of, oh, this is what's on people's minds about this stuff. You're maybe not aware.
Yeah, I think it wasn't a surprise, but I think everyone wonders, how do you, the big two questions I got was, and we spent most of the time talking about, was how do you justify it?
Mm.
And then how do you scale it? Like, how do you do that? Because even though VR's been around forever, it feels like most people think it's brand new and it's a fad, and it's for kids for games.
Oh, absolutely.
Or other things.
And they just see a picture, like the decision makers, the people who control the budgets. They see one picture of somebody wearing a headset.
That's right.
And
That's right.
No thanks.
Well, and everything on TV is they're doing games.
Yeah.
And so we talked a lot about how to do that, and seeing is believing.
Absolutely.
And so the way we did it at Walmart was I pulled all the C-suite into a room, and there's a module called Walk the Plank.
Yep.
Where you have to walk this plank on top of a skyscraper and step off.
Mm-hmm.
And I made them all watch each other do it, one after the other, and none of them could do it. We had one person cry, which, unfortunate, but it was funny. And so that got the buy-in, because they immediately understood that they knew they were safe, but they couldn't do it. And so it tricks your brain into thinking it's real. And then just the scaling is, you got to get buy-in from the end user. Like, just because the leaders want it, if the end user doesn't matter. Yeah. And so we spent a lot of time talking about getting the end user involved early and engaged, and pushing for it versus pushing it to them. Because just because the leader wants it doesn't mean anyone's going to use it.
That's true. Yeah, but it's one of those things where I think it comes with a lot of ammunition for that argument. Well, I don't want to call it an argument, for the conversation about buy-in, because there is real ROI. It isn't just, because I think people might get focused too much on the front end of, oh, it's this technology and the equipment I have to buy, and they're very focused on that. Well, let's talk about the outcomes that are very real and almost obvious in cases where, the Walmart example, the product itself. We're not using product for people to learn how to save product. We're keeping people safe while they learn how to be safe. People are learning how to do their jobs well without pissing off customers by doing the wrong thing. It goes on and on and on. All of those things reflect this bottom line that they're already concerned about. So I think it's up, the advice is to learning professionals who are wrestling with this or curious, can I do this? Should I do this? Is try not to get hung up on that, the technology conversation about it, but focus on, this is what we need to do, this is what we're trying to do, and this is why this works.
That's right.
Yeah. I mean, that applies to almost everything, I think.
Yeah,
but I think right here, there are some very easy lines to draw between, if we use this is what happens. So that's exciting to me. The one you described about the plank, one of the first things I saw, and I don't know why, I was in South Africa at a learning conference there when I saw it, and then people were debuting their VR, and one of it was for high-rise construction, and it was, I don't know all the terminology. This one was, you could hear it, you had your headset on, but it also knew where you were, right? Right. So where you moved around. Yep. And you would have to get into one of those little construction elevators, push up, go all the way up, take that ride. It wasn't like cutscene. It was take the whole ride, get out, walk all the way to the end of the beam, turn, read the numbers, turn, walk back, go to this keypad, punch the numbers in before you could get down. And it seems like a fun game, and people are out, but the company's saying, no, you don't understand. We do this, and the people that can't cut it, that don't do it, I don't have to invest another penny in training them on anything else.
That's exactly
because they can't get up there and do it.
That's right. We did the same thing for order filling. So in a distribution center, order filling is just a rough job. It's hot in the summer, cold in the winter. You're throwing heavy cases all day. Mm-hmm. Everybody thinks they want to do it because it pays a lot of money, because it's a tough job. And we had very high turnover, 85% in the first 90 days. So we created a module where you get order filled for 20 minutes in VR. day one, that's what you did. We cut turnover from 85% to 15%. Because day one, to your exact point, once they put that on and we're doing it, they knew, I don't want to do this.
Right.
And they left. And it's unfortunate, but better day one than day 88.
Yeah.
And we didn't invest any money. So all hard jobs, that's what we suggest is put somebody through it day one. They'll feel like it's really what they do, and they'll know if they want to do it or not, and it'll save you a ton of money. And, something else that when you talked about ROI, what's starting to come out now is, I don't know if you've ever heard of something called devices as a service. So it's basically rental, rent to own, kind of like you do your phones now. Well, there's companies that are now doing that with VR headsets. So now the capital cost of replacing them every 3 years or 4 years is gone. And you can rent it to own it over the 3-year period. The end of you renew the contract after 3 to 4 years, and you get new headsets. And so now there's not this capital outlay that you have to try to fight for. It's just this OpEx cost that just runs through and becomes part of the P&L and just keeps going. And so that's going to help companies a ton as well. Is now you don't have to go beg for capital every 4 years to replace them. You just continue with this OpEx cost, and it just becomes part of your P&L.
Yeah, that's a great point, because it is, I think, a big stumbling block is I have to buy more equipment for, and that like you said, especially it's not like I'm buying this piece of machinery that's going to be around for 15 years. It's something that's built to not be.
Right, just like your PCs. And we don't even blink, or our phones. Yeah. People don't even blink that every 3 to 4 years they go get a new one. Yeah. So I think that will help this become similar to your phones and PCs. Yeah.
Well, Andy, I really appreciate you taking some time and hanging out with us and talking about this stuff. I find it super fascinating. What's a great way for people to find you? I'm assuming LinkedIn.
Yeah, I'm on LinkedIn, Andy Trainor. Just reach out anytime. I'm happy to talk to anybody about any of this.
Yeah, because I hear about people who are very interested and curious about what it is, what it can do, and I can barely scratch the surface, and obviously you've got the experience. So if somebody wants to know more about it, they should hook up with Andy and find out. So
absolutely.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
All right.